everyone, I'm Rebecca and welcome back to my sewing room. This week we are going to continue to work on the late 1870s natural form gown. That one right here. And we are going to specifically continue working on this underskirt, the base skirt this week, because it is time to add the trimming. Since the last video, I have gone around and I did finish that hem that I was so frustratingly remarking and repinning and over. And it took me a long time to do that hem, but luckily it is now done and it is time to start applying the trimmings. So the first one that I'm going to start with is going to be the pleats right along the bottom of the skirt. I think in general I'm probably going to work bottom up from this, so I'm going to start with the pleats, then I'm going to follow that up with the ruffle, the wider ruffle section that's next, and then the one that has the shirred bit on the top. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, I went over all of the different decorations and everything when I analyzed this dress last week, so do make sure that you check out that video, which I will link right up here and also down below in the description. But yes, this week is time for trimming. So with those pleats, the first thing that I did was I went through and based on the scale of the drawing versus my skirt, I figured out what those pleats should be height-wise, like how tall they should be. And then I kind of ignored that answer because the scale told me that 3 inches of the pleats was showing. And 3 inches for pleats just seems so short and squatty. Now I know for sure that these pleats do continue up a little taller than that underneath the ruffle, so I figured like 4 inches even then, that's better, but I think I'm gonna allow it just a little bit extra and I'm going to go for a 4.5 inch finished width, and that means like a 5.5 inch total height for unfinished, as in including the seam allowance. So I'm going to start by possibly ripping or cutting, we'll see which I decide to do, but 5.5 inch strips of my silk, my periwinkle silk, and I am going to hem the bottom. I'm going to do it by machine because I can't. Like, I know that there are people out there who hand hem their ruffles and pleats and everything. I am not one of those people, which is funny because I told you last week that I am one of those people who hems the skirt, even if it doesn't show. Like, I can't just put a line of stitching, you know, partway up my skirt with a machine. I can't do that. So the skirt is hand hemmed, but the pleats, they're gonna be machine hemmed because yeah. So I'm gonna start with doing the machine hem on that. The strips, by the way, I'm probably going to go ahead and I'm pretty sure I have enough fabric to do like a 3 times as wide type pleat. Basically your standard pleat is 3 times as much fabric as whatever it is pleated to. And that would mean that the pleats are not overlapping, they are just their full individual pleat, but it's a full pleat. Like each pleat is the depth that it shows on the outside. Does that make sense at all? I'll try to show you in a visual what I mean, but basically like if you have a 1 inch deep pleat, that is actually going to take up 3 inches of fabric. So I am going to make those strips be 3 times the width around my hem, and then I'm going to hem them, and then I'm going to serge the top of them just to finish that off so I don't have to worry about stray threads, and then I'm going to pleat them. And I tend to pleat by eyeballing. You might remember, if you've been around my channel since this fall, that I found a like pleater system, like an old Antique Simplicity one, but if you watch that video you'll know that it did not work very well, and I don't have any other like quick and easy method. I know people do fork pleats, people have pleating boards, etc. I eyeball. You know, especially when you're talking about like a 5.5 inch wide strip, and at that point it'll be even narrower because I will have hemmed it. It's just easier to eyeball. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to eyeball all my pleats. They're probably going to be about 1 inch deep. I might go for 3/4 of an inch deep. We'll see which I decide. But time to pleat forever. Doing this many pleats is a very slow, laborious process, and I've gotten a little bit more than half of them done at this point. So I still have something like 3.5 of these panels to pleat up out of 8 total, and hopefully, if I did my math right, that will fit around the skirt. But yeah, I mean, I think they look gorgeous. They're very crispy, but more pleating tomorrow. So good night. So I have now spent about another hour pleating up all of the pleats for the bottom of the dress. And what is going to happen now is I have left a little bit, about like half a panel, I have left that unpleated. And that is because I'm now going to take the bottom of the skirt, I'm going to mark where these pleats need to go except like upside down. So basically, instead of just putting these pleats flat against the skirt like this, I don't want this top part where the serging is to be seen. Oh, by the way, I serged over my pleats. I sewed them, then I serged them, and I also serged the part that I have not pleated yet. And I'll get to that in a moment. But instead of going like this flat on the skirt, I want to actually put them on upside down, right sides together, because that will cause the top to get folded under like this so that I won't see the serged edge at all. That'll be like right under there, under the seam. I won't see the stitch line, etc. So that means that I'm going to mark on the skirt about like, what did I say? Like 4 inches, I think, up from where the bottom of the skirt is. Basically, I want the bottom of the pleats to be even with the bottom of the skirt. And so whatever that length is, I'm gonna mark that and then lay this against there and stitch all of these pleats on. I'm going to start where I started the pleats, and I'm going to end kind of where I have stopped the pleats. Then this section, while it's all laying flat on the skirt, I'm going to pleat directly to the skirt and sew it on, because just in case I have to wiggle my pleats and tweak them a little bit so that they fit the skirt, I have that play in this section. I can make my pleats deeper, etc., or less deep than the rest of the pleats on here in this section. So this is probably going to be the side back of the skirt, because I believe that will be the least obvious, and that's what I'm gonna do. I'm not sure that I was clear on how that works, so I just wanted to show you more precisely. This is 4 7/8 inch wide from top to bottom, and when we put it here, we want it to be maybe 1/8 inch past the bottom right here, just to fully cover that. And when this is folded in, this space under here from the hem to the edge of the serging is 3 3/4 inches. So that line's going to be drawn 3 3/4 inches up from the bottom. And then I align this with the line like this and stitch along there. So I've attached all of the pleats to the skirt, and I've gotten to the unpleated section right here, but there is way too much of this left. This is about 5.5 inches left that I need to pleat down to. But this is like 24.5 inches, and really it should be like 16.5 inches, because that would be 3 times 5.5. So I think I have a seam right here. I think I may need to open up the hem, open up the seam, and just get rid of some extra fabric, because it's either that or undo a whole bunch of serging sections and then like repleat. And I feel like the first option is the lesser of the two evils. So I will just wind up taking some of this out, because yeah, it's just too much to pleat down to. And that's life. So I'm gonna fix that and get the rest of it pleated down and attach it to the skirt. Oh my gosh, I am so happy with how they look. I actually managed to squidge in all of that area by undoing some of the other pleats around that area and making them tighter. At this point, I don't even know where it was. I don't know if it was on this side of the skirt or the other side of the skirt, but yeah, I fit them all in and I love how it looks. So now it is time to move on to ruffle number 2. So ruffle number 2 is this one that gets the binding on both edges. I'm not 100% positive how I'm going to do that, but I did get some pink matte satin from Joann's. So that's just going to be poly matte satin. I had some in my stash already, and it goes well with the fringe, like the tassels fringe that I got from Amazon. So I'm going to cut little strips of that and probably use it like bias tape. I'm not going to do piping because that's going to make it too stiff. So I'm probably going to use it like bias tape and bind the top and the bottom of this. And then I'm also going to find out the scale for how wide this section should be right here. So I decided instead of jumping fully into the next ruffle piece, I would do a test first. So that's what this is. I originally started with 5.5 inches wide this way, or tall, I guess, because that is what the scale told me. But just like with the pleats, it just seemed wrong from like top to bottom. So I actually lengthened this by a little bit. Luckily I had done it with a fold down here, so I could just lengthen it, and it wound up being 6 inches total from top to bottom. And then this top piece is 2 inches, the bottom part is 4, and then there's the gathering stitch in between. And I have cut the binding strips, except I cut all of my binding strips 2 inches wide, and then I like sewed a whole bunch of them together. You can see them all over my floor. 2 inches is too wide. So I think you probably saw when I folded this over, it's going way past where I need it to go because I thought that I wanted the binding to be 1/2 inch wide. I have no idea why I thought that, because frankly, this top part up here, I love the look of that. This is a 1/4 inch wide. This one is just slightly wider than that, but I think I would rather, for, I don't know, equality's sake or whatever, do them the same. I don't mind. This one's like 5/16 of an inch, so it's very close, but just a little bit bigger. And then likewise, I had made a strip here that I originally had just like folded it to this, to I think that's about 3/4 of an inch wide, laid it down right there and was like, oh my God, that's way too wide. So then I folded it again, and I have not measured this, but eyeballing it, it looks like 3/8 of an inch, and that is the width that that looks good at. So I guess that means I have to narrow all of this, and I'll just do it with a rotary cutter, but I've got to cut a bunch of this off because this is just too wide everywhere. And in doing that, I just wind up with a lot of extra fabric or like thick fold right here. So I'm really glad that I did this test piece to figure all of that out. Tomorrow, since it's now 11:30, tomorrow I can go ahead and cut all of my strips of this. Oh, I guess the other thing that I need to do is double check what I want it gathered down to, because right now I don't know the ratio. I think this is fairly close at where I want it. I might pull up the gathering string a little bit more, but especially this area right here, I think that the gathering is pretty close to where I want it. So I have to measure how long this entire piece is and then how much it's actually taking up in the gathered area, find that ratio, and then take the measurement of my skirt and find out how much of this I need. That way I don't cut excess and waste. Because I mean, I cut a little bit of extra on the pleated ruffle, but it was close, and I want to stay at least within that close, especially since this requires so much prep time. So this ruffle is going to take a lot of work. I'm hoping maybe I can finish it tomorrow, but with everything that I have to do, I am not sure. I have started in on prepping the ruffle. So this is a 6 inch wide piece of silk, like I mentioned before. And then I cut my 2 inch wide binding just in half. So now it's 1 inch wide. I've already applied these right sides together to either side of the silk. And now I'm going to press them out, press the edge in, and then press it around, pin it in place, and sew it in place so that this will wind up with 1/4 inch binding on either side. So a lot of pressing and pinning in my future, but this is what I'm working on tonight. Oh my gosh, this is taking for freaking ever. First off, this polyester doesn't want to hold a press. So like I've pressed it a whole bunch, but as you can see, it's just kind of not wanting to be pressed. I found that the clips are working slightly better than the pins, but still. The next bit is that 1 inch was actually too narrow. This should have been at least 1 1/8, maybe 1 1/4 inches. And so like there's just a little bit folded on the inside, and it is making things much more difficult because I'll sew it down and then it like either won't catch the underside or it won't catch either because I'm stitching from the other side on the ditch. And so I'm having to resew and resew. I've literally only done about 60 inches so far on each side, and this is like 4.5 times that. So this isn't gonna get finished tonight, but here we are. This is what I mean. From the outside, it looks great, but then you turn it to the back side, which probably will show because it's a ruffle, and we have pieces that didn't get stitched down at all, or pieces where the inside didn't get caught. And they look crappy, and now I have to unpick that piece and try and re-squidge that over and get them pinned in and sewn in, and oh my god, it's a nightmare. Well, it's still Thursday, kind of, as in it's after midnight, but the binding is finally finished. So now I am drawing a line on 4 inches up from the bottom, and that will be where I gather on just on either side of that line to pull up. I'm also going to mark this into sections and mark the skirt into sections so that I know what gathering points can be like attached to where, so that I don't have to just sort of eyeball the whole thing. So I've run the gathering stitches on either side of that line. So that was 4 inches up from the bottom. And I ran basically so that there would be 2 sections. I sectioned this out into 7 pieces, 32.75 inches each section. And then 2 sections share 1 gathering thread, and then I went to the next gathering thread just in case, you know, they were to break or something like that. And I'm starting to pull them up now. 1 section did get its own gathering thread because, you know, 7 isn't divisible by 2. But that's where we're at right now. And then I was looking at this, and normally for like a ruffle, it's easier to mark the top, but because this ruffle winds up being freestanding up here, a ghost of that line, even if I can erase it all the way, I know that usually the friction pens don't fully erase on silk, so a ghost of that line would appear right at the top here, and this is going to hang away from the skirt, if that makes sense. So I'm actually going to mark the line for where the gathering stitches will be. It will be slightly more annoying to sew it on since I'll have to keep checking my line and see where that is, but it's worth it. So I'm going to mark a line since this is supposed to overlap by 1 inch with the pleats down at the bottom. I'm going to mark that line 3 inches up from the top of the pleats and just draw it on with friction pen and then pin all of this into place. But I have a feeling that's going to wind up being tomorrow because it's late. The first part of the second ruffle is now on. So now I just need to put the pink strip that goes over the gathering point. I need to make that and put that on, but it's making me giddy how cute this looks already. So I thought I was going to make this easy on myself by using a bias tape maker to make this. But as you can see by this section right here, because this is freaking polyester, it is refusing to hold a press, like at all. This is what happens when it comes out from underneath the iron. I don't care if the iron is like right here, butting up to the bias tape maker, this is what happens. It's also, this bias tape maker was too wide. This one, it like stands it up on the edge. I don't know if you can see that, but it doesn't make it flat when it comes out. So it was particularly bad with the polyester. And then this one, the strips that I have, it's too wide for the bias tape maker. And honestly, this might be just a little bit on the narrow side, but these are the 3 that I have. I don't have any others. The idea with a bias tape maker is that you feed, well, I can show you on this one actually, you feed the little bit through and then you pull this out and it presses it over, like it just kind of folds it in, and you just follow along with the iron right here. And as you go back, you wind up with bias tape that's already folded. But because this refuses to fold, it's driving me crazy. So at this point, I don't know what I'm gonna do. This doesn't unfortunately match any of the ribbons that I have that are the right width. This would be the closest one here, but it is way too wide. It's also slightly off color-wise, but it's way too wide. So one of the things that I'm debating about is I do have a light pink velvet ribbon, but it is the wrong light pink. So just to show you in comparison, this is the difference. So like we're talking really different. I don't know if that will drive me crazy or not, because I will have other colors in this as well. For example, this is the fringe that I will be using on the overdress. So there's all sorts of shades of pink in there, none this light, but there are all sorts of shades in there. And I mean, there's even pink velvet ribbon that's like a hotter pink, but this was supposed to be this pink. So I don't know at this point, but I'm gonna go see a play and I guess I'll work on this tonight. I am back from the show that I saw, and that bias tape, trying to make that for going on that ruffle is just giving me so much trouble that I think I'm gonna move on to the next ruffle first. I really want to finish all of the skirt trimming for this video. It is now Friday night at 11 p.m. and if I keep focusing so much time on trying to make this work, like pressing this and just trying to make it work, I'm gonna waste all of my time. So since I have about a day-ish left for this video, I want to move on to ruffle number 3. So ruffle number 3, it is basically ruched on top with not seeing any edge on the top. So it is sewn on right sides together, then flipped down, kind of like the pleats on the bottom, but it's ruched. So we have a line of gathering and then a gap, then a line of gathering, and then the binding on the bottom again. Ugh, the binding was so annoying yesterday. I'm not looking forward to doing more of it, but here we are again, and it's going to be better than this binding that I'm trying to do for ruffle number 2. So I'm going to work on that. I'm going to figure out the scale first off. I don't think the scale is going to be right, just like the other 2 ruffles have not been correct in the scale math-wise. So I'm going to figure out the math scale, then I'm going to see what actually looks right to me and make a little test piece of it and then go for it. Hopefully it won't be too bad. Fingers crossed. And hopefully I can get the binding on that. And the reason that I'm putting that off too is because I have to go to Joann's tomorrow to pick up some cotton sateen for the bodice, which will be later, but I'm picking that up tomorrow anyway, so I might as well look to see at Joann's if maybe there's like a ribbon trim or some other thing that I can use besides the bias tape that already like has finished edges, etc., that maybe I can put on the skirt. Oh great, Dora is looking at the skirt like she's trying to figure out how to get under it, because that's what cats do. I don't want her to go under the skirt. It's so detailed and it looks so pretty. Anyway, I'm going to go get to work on ruffle tier number 3 and detach my cat from this skirt. And we will both see you later. So I made a little test piece here out of the same test piece that I'd used before, and I determined that this was actually a little bit too wide. This is a 3-inch ruffle down on the bottom and then 1 inch up here, basically, of the shirring, and it's honestly a little too wide. I liked it better if I folded in the bottom like that, and then of course this top is folded in, so it would be folded in like that. That wound up being a little bit better. So the total width that I'm going to cut is going to be 4 1/4 inch wide strips, and then there's a 1/2 inch seam allowance on the top that's taken out of that. The bottom will be bound, and then the shirred portion will be 1 1/8 inch wide. I know that's a weird measurement, but that is just how it came out that I liked it best, so that's what it's going to be. And I haven't exactly figured out just how far up from the second ruffle it's going to be, but I think there's going to be a gap of like about this much between the top of the second ruffle and the bottom of the third ruffle, and that should give me like the image. By the way, this is not scale. The scale told me it should be 3 inches tall total. That was going to be way too short, so I'm making it 3 3/4 inches total once the seam allowance is taken out of it, and I think that that will be good. So I'm right now measuring the skirt to figure out just how much I need to get all the way around it. I've determined that my ratio is that 12 inches ungathered equals 6.5 inches gathered. So it's not quite a double portion of gathering, but close. And the skirt, though, obviously it has panels that are angled. They're, you know, A-line panels. So I have to measure the skirt to see what we're at this point so that I don't make a lot of extra based on the previous measurement, because each time it gets a little bit smaller. It's not a lot, but it does get a little bit smaller. So I'm going to take care of that, and then I am going to rip my panels for this once I find out how many I need, and start putting my ruffle together. So I went to Joann's to get some options for this so that I don't have to worry about trying to mess with the bias tape. And this one right here, this is velvet ribbon. I think it is a 1/2 inch wide. To be honest, I did not even check the spool. Yeah, it's a 1/2 inch wide. And then this one is, I think, 3/8 inch wide. It's a little narrower, and it's like a semi-sheer that has kind of a, I don't know, a rougher texture, but it was a really nice color. And in fact, color match wise, this one is a closer color match to this. However, because this is semi-sheer, I think I'm actually seeing the blue behind, and I feel like it's giving it more of a purple air, whereas like the velvet ribbon, and you know I love velvet ribbon if you've been around this channel, although it is a lighter pink, I think that, I don't know, because it's a different texture, it's somehow working with the sheen of this anyway. This one was a little bit wider than I wanted, but like looking at it all together, I don't hate that thickness, honestly. Like I was going for more of this thickness, but I'm not hating this one. And the real kicker here is that the Joann's that I went to had 1 spool of this, only 9 feet, and 2 spools of the velvet ribbon. So I think I'm gonna go with the velvet ribbon because otherwise I will have to go to another Joann's to find another one of these, which I don't particularly want to do. These are the tassels that I'm planning to use for the overdress, so that just kind of shows you more color pickup. I know I'm blocking light, but this has a lot of color in it, and it does have velvet ribbon in it. It's a much brighter pink, obviously, up here, but it has all sorts of colors in the tassels themselves, all sorts of sheen, and obviously a lot of texture. And so I feel like adding another texture and a slightly lighter pink is not really a bad thing. And so I think I'm gonna just go with the velvet ribbon and sew that on because I'm liking that, and you all know I love velvet ribbon, so obviously I have to use it in everything I make pretty much. And because there were 2 spools of this, it's plenty for what I need. I estimate that I'll need just under 5 yards total. So yeah, I better get going with that. And I'm also still working on this upper ruffle as well. So for this third ruffle here, I have bound the edge, obviously, which was still a pain, just like the last one, but it was just the one. This top edge is serged right up here. And then I went and I marked a line 1 5/8 inches down from the top because that would allow me a 1 1/8 space right here and then a 1/2 inch seam allowance right here. And I marked all of that, and then I divided it into 6, but I think it wound up being like every 40 7/8 inches apart. I made a little mark right here, and then I've run gathering stitches the 1/2 inch down and the 1 5/8 inch down, and I've just done like 1 stitch per each of those, as in it's just 1 row of stitching on each of those lines. And then everywhere that I've divided it, I've stopped the threads, so there are thread ends and I can pull them up from there. I figure that way it's less likely for the thread to break, but I didn't want to like have way too many threads because these 2 will still act together. It's just that when you start getting this far apart, it does start to get like a little bit far-ish when you're ruching it. Let me just show you what it looks like gathered for a moment. And like that, you wind up with this lovely bit of ruching. So with this third ruffle, I went and I drew it up like you saw, and then I've matched the dots on the ruffle to the dots on the skirt. Again, this was 5 1/4 inches up from this line right here. You're looking at this upside down, by the way, because there's the edge of the skirt. And now I have sewn all of this on. I tried to stay right on the stitch line, but that did not always work. But now tomorrow, because stupid daylight savings time has made me lose an hour, tomorrow I will go and I will press that down. So I'll just press right along there, but really gently because I don't want to like shrink in any of the gathering. So I just want it to lay that way. And then once that's done, then I'm going to make sure these other gathering stitches are pulled up and stitch there along this one here so that that can be attached down to the skirt, and then the rest of the ruffle will just be free flowing there. But stitching on top of that will ensure that all of those gathers stay in place. That's how shirring works. And when that's done, then I'll put the velvet ribbon on here and the skirt will be done. This second row is all sewn on now, so that is stitched down to the skirt. It just, opens up to there basically. That's all encased. And then I also have put the velvet ribbon on, so that means the skirt is done, which I will show you in just a moment. But first I wanted to take a look at the underside of this because I think it's entertaining. Because, I did all of that hem up here, the top of it, by hand, but then it gets all of the other lines of stitching in there, so it's almost like it's not even really frankly needed. But they do go all over, like you can see they're going above the hem facing there and all throughout. So it's interesting because it almost lends a layer of like a quilted feeling to it. But this is the skirt all together. So naturally, as so often seems to be the case, the trim took way longer than I thought on this dress. But I am super, super pleased with how it looks, and a little bit sad that a whole bunch of it is going to be covered up by the overdress, but there we are. Such is life, I suppose. I'm also kind of intrigued. As I mentioned, I think in the last video on this, This is the exact same fabric that I used for my fairy godmother bustle several years ago. Now that is a very, very early 1870s bustle, like literally around 1870, 1871, etc. But it's made out of the exact same fabric, and it is also trimmed with pink. Different pink, but still trimmed with pink. And I am very tempted to see if they can be like mixed and matched. I already, for the fairy godmother, have a day bodice and an evening bodice with then the bustle skirts. So yeah, I'm a little intrigued by that, and I might play around with that possibly in the future. But in the meantime, the next part of this project will be starting on the bodice with the bodice mock-up, or repatterning kind of my basic bodice block for the mock-up, because it does not fit my normal bodice block. It's quite a bit different with the narrow back that I talked about in the last video. So I will be repatterning that and doing the bodice mock-up, and then delving into the rest of the bodice slash overskirt, because frankly it's all connected in one. However, that is not going to be next week's video. Next week, you actually did see a sneak peek of this fabric while I was showing you the bottom of this. I'm not going to show it to you again, so rewind if you want to see it. But next week I am doing a different interim project that is timely with something that is coming out very, very soon. So I will be going to a little farther back in time for that project, and I will be working on something Regency next week. I'll be back with the bustle dress as soon as I finish the Regency dress. Hopefully in 1 week, maybe 2 weeks. We'll see how that goes. But I do hope that you have enjoyed the videos on this skirt so far. If you like this video, please go ahead and click the thumbs up icon. And if you'd like to see more videos like this from me, please go ahead and click subscribe and the little bell icon to be notified every time I post a new video. I do post videos here on YouTube twice a week, with my sewing vlogs like this out on Tuesdays and other costuming content out on Saturdays. But I post every day over on my Instagram, so please go follow me on Instagram. That's at Lady Rebecca Fashions. And if you'd like to help support all of the work that I do on this channel, I do have a link to my Patreon and my Ko-fi down in the description below. I'd also like to give a special shout out to my Edwardian level patrons, Sharon, Julie, and Mirage. Thank you all so much for joining me today. Have a wonderful week, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Happy sewing!